I don't even know if I'm ever going to upload this video, but I'm at least going to give it a shot, because I think that this is very important. In April this year, I got a text message, which is easily the worst text I have read so far in my life. It was from a friend of my friend E. I decided to call him E for this video. In it, he wrote that E had been found dead in his apartment, and that he had killed himself. I first thought that it was some kind of a sick joke because myself and a lot of people that I'm friends with have a really dark sense of humor, but I was immediately assured that this wasn't a joke. He told me that one of E's family members had found him after having to first break down the door to his apartment with the help of the police. He then told me that he would contact me again about the date for E's funeral. At the funeral, I for the first time got to see E's family. We never talked about his family, and E never asked me about mine either. I think he met my brother once, several years back, but that's about it. Me and my wife followed everyone into the chapel where the ceremony was being held. We sat down and listened to a priest who had never met E talk about what it was like as a person in life. We placed our flowers on his coffin. Then we got into our car and drove off. E had been mentally unwell since even before I met him, and we had known each other for 11 years. As a person, he was this rare mix of being intelligent, kind of chaotic as a person, impulsive, but also extremely kind. We met under very bad circumstances. Both of us were unemployed. E lived in a one-room apartment in this shithole of a town, and I still lived with my parents in another complete landfill of a town which had burned to the ground about 200 years ago, and I'm still to this day perplexed by why they consider it to be worth rebuilding. During this period of my life, I began to become more and more depressed. There was this constant deep feeling of pointlessness. I stopped eating. I stopped leaving my room except if I had to go to work, which I in practice only did in order to keep my parents off my back. At that point, I wouldn't even have cared if I received a paycheck or not. I just wanted to be left alone. This slow, grinding downward spiral came to a point where I started to think about suicide. It felt like I was making everyone around me miserable just by existing, and that by not being, they would, after a few years, finally be able to be happy. And I honestly believed that. As it later turned out, several years later, I was diagnosed with suffering from severe depression and PTSD from having nearly died a few years before I started becoming depressed in a very serious accident. It is apparently very common that people who have had near-death experiences like surviving cancer, for instance, afterward become extremely depressed. It is very strange since you think that that's when you would be the happiest, but your brain works in very mysterious ways. I'm telling you this because during all of these years that I lived with severe depression, I had two things that E never had. Number one, I had my family's 100% support, even when I treated them like trash. And number two, I had my girlfriend, who later became my wife. When I sat awake crying without even knowing why at 4 o'clock in the morning, she'd sit there with me despite that she had to go to work in just a few hours. She stayed with me through this hellish ride I dragged her along for, all of these years. And E never had that. When he couldn't sleep at night, he had an empty apartment. Nothing else. And as I slowly got better, E stayed just the same. I tried to support him and tell him to keep going to his meetings with his therapist, keep trying to see if there's any new medication that helps. I told him that he could call me no matter the time and I would be there. He always said that he appreciated my concern, but I started to get the feeling that he thought it was uncomfortable to talk about and that he didn't want to do it, so I thought that he would come to me if he wanted to talk. Me and E primarily interacted with each other through Skype. We very rarely met in person, but we would talk for hours. We'd play games like 7 Days to Die, and while we were chopping up corpses with fire axes, we'd discuss everything from politics, pop culture, history, literature, and would have the always important discussion about what is superior, tits or ass. The correct answer is ass, by the way. We would just have fun. We would have a lot of fun, even though we didn't meet each other a lot, and he accepted what type of person I am, that I don't really like large amounts of people, and I enjoy being kind of an introvert. I like being alone, with a very limited amount of company. I would like to pause time here. Me and E killing things in a digital environment, drinking, occasionally pausing to Google something because we knew that one of us was a goddamn liar, and we would just enjoy each other's company. Fast forward a few years, I'm working night shifts at a warehouse, I got a baby on the way with my wife, and I'm going to school during the day. I have less and less free time to sit on Skype and go out in the middle of the week drinking, and I often needed to pass on offers being made by E to play games or go out. He of course said that it was okay because our relationship had always been like this, very rarely meeting each other, but always enjoying our company when we talked. But about a year later, E messaged me pretty much out of nowhere saying that he didn't think that we could be friends anymore because we almost never met each other. I immediately thought that this was very strange. He knew I wasn't the type of person who likes being around large groups of people out late. And he knew that I didn't say no to staying up late talking because I didn't want to stay friends. I did it because I had a lack of time. So this was something else. This was very strange to me. And I think that this is where I should have seen it, because I did this myself when I was depressed. I shut myself away from friends and family. Because you feel like you're contagious, like the best thing you can do for everyone around you is to just lock the door, turn off your phone, and disappear. And that was what E was doing. He was hoping I would stop thinking about him, stop wanting to be his friend, because then it would hurt less for me when he checked out. And he was wrong, of course. I remember my first reaction to his suicide, and it wasn't grief, it was anger. I was so fucking mad at him. We'd managed to find this little hidden away organization which specialized in helping men with depression and anger management issues, and I even called them when he had booked an appointment, begging them to make sure that he actually showed up, and I told them to call me if he didn't show. I put so much hope in that. He told me weeks before his death that he was feeling better. He said that he'd realized that he needed to focus on his own health and put everything else on hold, which I thought was very good and a wise decision. But then he just ends it all. I was furious, but when I later thought about it more, that's when the grief really started. Because I hadn't thought about that E had been fighting against these demons for well over a decade, alone. The guy was a goddamn warrior. I wouldn't have lasted that long, never. Not without the support of my family and my wife. This is why I want to talk about men and depression in this video. And the reason I want to direct my attention specifically to men is due to how men are wired and that I have experience from what it feels like to be a man and be depressed. Men naturally are protective of others. That is what we do. We're very good at it because we're bigger and stronger than women and children. But in our modern day and age, we don't need to defend others in the same way. Not with a spear at the entrance to our cave, with a saber-toothed tiger skulking around outside in the dark. But our brains still think that we need to do that. I hate when feminists blame toxic masculinity for the high amount of male suicides that are happening every day. Because it's not about that. To everyone's great surprise, feminists yet again fail to understand the inner workings of men. They think that it's about men's fear of appearing to be weak that drives men to not seek help and reach out. For me, it was never about that, and I'm pretty sure that that wasn't the case for E as well. Because E couldn't give less of a shit about if anyone thought that he was a tough guy. He in fact wasn't a fan of tough guys in general, and he got a kick out of bullying bullies at bars and at parties. If you thought you were a badass, E would spend the rest of the evening just trying to piss you off. He thought that kind of stuff was hilarious. Pretentious, aggressive assholes. He got a kick out of irritating them. That was nothing which he aspired to be. The tough guy. So it was never about weakness. It was about wanting to protect others. Wanting to spare other people from misery. From spreading your depression. As I said earlier, when I was the most depressed, I seriously felt like I made people sick and unhappy by letting them be around me. I shut myself away so that they could be happier. E told me the same thing when I confronted him one time about not returning my phone calls. He said that he didn't want me to worry, he didn't want me to feel bad about him having his episodes. Suicide is very often described by people as being an extremely selfish act. But some people do it because they think that their sheer existence makes the world a worse place. You actually think that. I know that from my own experience that you believe that. You believe that you are something excessive, something damaging, something putrid. I believe as a person who suffered from depression, and having known someone who did as well, I think this is something which needs to be examined when we move further into understanding why so many men are today killing themselves. This toxic masculinity angle, primarily coming from women, may be true in some cases, but I dare say that you come to a point when you're depressed that is so dark that you couldn't care less about what other people think about you because you already view yourself as filth, as garbage. So any idea about not wanting to seem weak just becomes ridiculous because it implies that you still believe yourself to have some self-worth, some pride to uphold, which you, when you're down in that pitch black pit, don't. You don't have any pride. Feminists are clueless, and attacking masculinity for being the culprit is a flat, boring, and in most cases, spiteful theory. They're using male suicide in order to criticize and attack masculinity. I used to play in a punk band when I was about 15 years old, and our bass player in the band knew a guy on his football team at school whose father killed himself in a, for me at the time, completely bizarre manner. This guy's dad worked in a big mine, which exists close to where I grew up. It's one of the biggest in Sweden, and a town has been built around it full of people who work there. This guy's father had, at least the way our bassist told us, come home from work late at night, said hi to his wife who was still awake, and heated up some leftovers from the fridge. And after eating, he then, without a word to anyone in the house, he took his rifle, walked out into the dark, into the forest, and he shot himself in the head. No goodbye note, nothing. No one in his family even knew that he was outside until they heard a shot echo through the woods. I think about that every time I see an article written by some fat blue-haired harpy meandering on about the same old stale bullshit about toxic masculinity and men's alleged obsession about not wanting to be seen as weak. Do you, dear listener, think that a man who, without even saying goodbye to his wife or kids, had a fear of being seen as weak on his mind when he killed himself? I believe more in the theory that the pain he felt inside was just too massive and insufferable, so that he just wanted it all to end, no matter the cost. And that's the part that really kills me about E, apart from losing him. I should have called it. I should have called that shit way before it happened, because E didn't just without a warning end it all. I knew he was miserable. I knew that Sweden's allegedly world-class mental health care had since long given up on him. But I prioritized my shitty dead-end job and studied for exams on courses I can't even remember anymore. And now the best friend that I've had is gone. I want to end this video with what I wish every day that I had told E more often than I did. If you suffer from depression, do not shut yourself away. You are not a disease without a cure, plaguing everyone around you like some miasma. Your death will make no one happy. It doesn't matter how much time will pass, you will be missed. I know that I'm just an asshole with a $20 microphone making videos on YouTube, but I'm asking you to just listen to me on this. Without even knowing you, I can promise that your death will leave a hole. An empty void where you should have been in this world. Even if you feel that no one even cares if you live or die, believe me when I say that you will be missed. And it might very well be by someone you haven't even met yet. And I know that this will sound sappy as fuck, but I don't care. Someone out there in the world, again, who maybe even hasn't met you yet, loves you, wants you to exist. Because when you're gone, someone will feel an emptiness in his or her life. Maybe for just a moment. But that emptiness is what you were supposed to fill. That emptiness is where you should have been in their life. I feel that emptiness at least once a day. And I know exactly who was supposed to fill it. Take your mental health seriously. It is normal sometimes to be down, to feel sad. That is normal. It is not normal to stand in the shower in the morning before you go to work and think about how long people around you would actually be sad if you killed yourself. Standing there having a cost-benefit analysis of checking out early. That is not normal. That is something that you need help dealing with, because you can't Iron Man that shit on your own. You can't fix that on your own. Just like you can't fix any other disease on your own just by positive thinking or by pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. People who tell you to do that are full of shit. Don't listen to them. Don't listen to anyone who tells you that you should feel any type of shame for asking for help, for reaching out. Don't ever listen to anybody who says that. It is excellent that you show that you're feeling bad, that you're feeling miserable. It's great that you show it. Don't hide it. Don't become another one of those people who just act happy, like everything is dandy, and then you blow your brains out, and everybody's wondering, oh, I didn't even know he was miserable. Don't become a person like that. Take your mental health seriously. And if you know someone around you who is depressed and is suffering from depression, don't let them say that you don't need to worry. You don't need to worry about me. Because you do. That's all I gotta say. It's stay strong, and I hope to be able to talk to you again in my next video. And I'm very willing to listen to anything you want to talk about in the comments, and I'll try to help you any way I can. But I have to put emphasis on the fact that I am not a psychologist. I am not a professional. Seek professional help. Because trust me, you will be missed.